All right, everybody, welcome to this week's Cornball Umpires Zoom Lunch Clinic. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about the forced play slide rule. Forced play slide rule is a rule that I think does not get enforced enough. And I think that could be for a variety of reasons. It could just be umpires don't know about the rule, don't know how to enforce the rule or apply the rule, or some umpires just don't they just don't want to enforce that rule. And the thing with umpiring is we don't get to pick what rules we enforce. We have to enforce the book. In the chat, I have put a link to this 2-page document that Jesse Devine from the South Dakota Umpires Association put together. This is the best explanation of the forced play slide rule that we have. And it covers all levels of baseball in South Dakota. And for those watching on YouTube, I will put the link to this in the description. I've taken a lot of stuff out of this document to use for today. And it is a really good thing, just keeping your bag just to refresh yourself, because as you'll find out, we have different rules based on what level of play we have. As always, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. I am, as of right now, flying solo. Congratulations to my partner in crime. He worked his first Big Ten game last night. And so he is on the road right now. And so as of right now, I'm flying solo. So if you have a question, please feel free to just unmute and ask the question, and we'll talk about it. Otherwise, we're going to focus mainly on the NFHS forced play slide rule. And the reason for this is because South Dakota baseball over the last 10 years has seen a drastic shift from OBR-based codes, official baseball rules, to the NFHS codes. And so we talked about at our spring meeting how we should be teaching the NFHS book and then teaching the OBR differences. Because I think only Legion and amateur baseball in South Dakota are using OBR based codes. And so we will start with just kind of what is forced play slide rule, why we have it. It's very simple why we have it. Player safety. This is not an interference rule, it's a player safety rule. There's a reason that we don't have, required contact. We don't require a throw to be made by the fielder. It's a player safety rule. We're going to talk about how we call it. And I just want to reiterate that the purpose of the forced play slide rule, it's a player safety rule. It's not an opportunity to go get a free out. Make it be there, but enforce the rule. So, National Federation of High School Sports Rule 8-4-2B says that a runner is out when he does not legally slide and causes illegal contact or alters the actions of the fielder immediately in the act of making the play on a forced play, or does not slide in the direct line between the bases. So there's a couple key points to highlight here. First is forced play. It's called the forced play slide rule. I hear frequently when I work tournaments, I hear umpires even at plate meetings say, make sure they slide. Make sure they slide on all plays. All plays they have to slide. No, that is not the rule under NFHS codes and under the OBR. The rule is you have to avoid contact. And some rule codes, I believe, ramp that up into saying you have to avoid malicious contact. Contact is allowed in certain situations when you slide. And we cannot call the force play slide rule on a tag play. So a kid's not out for not sliding at home plate unless there's some house rule or something like that. But we're talking about the general code. So the runner has a couple options. They can slide in a direction away from the fielder to avoid making contact. They can give up and vacate the baseline, or they can interfere. Those are the three options that they have. One special rule in NFHS, you cannot dive over a fielder. And so think like a hurdle in football. You can't do that. And the guideline that I was taught, and if anybody else has a different thought on this, the way that I was always taught was, do the spikes go above the head of the fielder? The spikes go above the head of the fielder, then we have a dive within the confines of this player safety rule. So we've defined what the force play slide rule is, but a lot of this depends on what the definition of a slide is. We need to define slide. There's two ways you can legally slide. You can either be feet first or head first. If it's a feet first slide, hip, buttock, and one leg must be on the ground. If it's a head first slide, we all know what that is. You're on your stomach, you're reaching for the base. The NFHS code has a rule where you have to be within the reach of the base with either a hand or foot, which mirrors a couple other rule codes. If what I will say is that while this may not be an illegal slide, if it's a tailor-made, 4-6-3, and the runner on first just gets down and slides, halfway between first and second to avoid interference, that's not a violation of the force play slide. Any questions on the definition of a legal slide? So let's talk about illegal slides, because there's a lot of those under the NFHS. So rolling, crossbody, or pop-up slides. The big one, I guess, I've been umpiring, this is my 15th season, and I've been doing it, seriously for 8, and I've been at the college level for 5. I can't say I've ever really seen a rolling slide or a crossbody slide, but I see pop-up slides all the time. And players don't always realize that, under certain rule codes at the youth levels, pop-up slides are legal. At other codes or in other codes, they're not. So in NFHS, you cannot do a pop-up slide. Another one is if the runner's other leg, the one that's not in contact with the ground, is above the knee of the fielder in a standing position. That's a big player safety issue. And what I look for is if I see any kicking motion, I'm gonna be calling the runner out, and the thought and the temperature of the game is gonna be in my head as far as, do I need to eject in this situation? Also under NFHS rules, a runner is not protected. Let me pull up the annotation here. A runner that is going this way is not protected beyond the base. So if they overslide here and there's contact, put a C for contact here. They might have slid legally, but they overslid the base. So they made contact. We have a violation. We have an illegal slide. If we're at the plate, it's fine for them to go through the baseline extended. Runner tries to injure the fielder. Again, this is my slashing slide, the kick that I was talking about. If we have this, you know, it's a very, very dangerous play. And I mean, I would be thinking ejection at this point, because this is an attempt to injure. You know, no one goes in sliding with their spikes, you know, at the fielder's knees. And then we also have a forced play slide definition here, where the runner does not slide on the ground in a direct line between the two bases. Any questions on illegal slides? So a runner can legally do two things. They can give up, which means they can either vacate the base path, or they can get down, or they can slide legally. And we've discussed what a legal slide is. So we're going to talk about the big differences between the Legion / South Dakota Amateur and the NFHS rule codes as it pertains to the forced play slide rule. The biggest one that I see most frequently that does not get called is when a runner makes the legal slide but pops up. And so because of the pop-up, it's an illegal slide. But there's a caveat, because a pop-up slide is technically legal under Legion and in South Dakota Amateur Baseball, but it's a very minute area where we have this rule. And so basically the gist of it is that a pop-up slide in Legion and Amateur is legal as long as the contact is on top of the base and the contact is not intentional or flagrant. A pop-up slide is a baseball play. The purpose of a pop-up slide is you have a ground ball that gets through the infield and you got a shortstop or an infielder diving for it, where they may be able to make a play on it, but they don't. Well, the runner will slide because they think there could be a play, but they're going to want to be able to pop up in case they're able to advance to the next base. So if they pop up and they go through the base, we got an issue. The contact is only allowed on top of the base. Also, in Legion and Amateur Baseball, if the runner overslides the base, legally, they will be protected in the baseline extended. They are not protected in high school or NFHS. So if you overslide, you are liable to be called out. Any question on kind of the big differences? So we're going to do a couple videos here, but just to kind of reiterate a couple things here. When we have forced play slide, the offending runner is out. The batter runner is out. And all runners return to the base they occupied at the time of the pitch, because we have interference. So you got to put a couple rules together on that to enforce the forced play slide rule. One of the biggest myths of the forced play slide rule is that there has to be an attempted play made after the fact. That's not true. As I said in the opening, this is a player safety rule, not necessarily an interference rule. If this was an interference rule, yes, we would want to see a play made or attempted to be made. So we'll do this at second base. A shortstop can catch the ball and just, if they do this and then they tuck the ball again because they don't want to hit the runner, that makes our job really, really easy. But if they just do this, by the letter of the rule, that's force play slide. And I would say use your best judgment on it, but that's, it falls back to player safety. And if we have coaches that are complaining about it, that's fine. We can always stand firm on player safety. I think actually in the text of the NCAA rulebook, which we're not going to talk about the NCAA rule, but the NCAA rulebook explicitly states that this is a player safety rule. And so we need to, if the one thing that you take away from this video is that the forced play slide rule is a player safety rule, and you need to enforce it as such, then you've taken away what I'm trying to communicate. If there are 2 outs and we have a runner on first, we have a ground ball to second base, and that runner the runner does not legally slide. I would still, just that's interference. But we got the 3rd out. So we're not, the out doesn't carry over to the next inning. But if you can go, that's interference, or that's an illegal slide, or that's, those are kind of the 2 that I'll use, is that's interference or that's an illegal slide pointing with my left hand. It's probably what we'll call a best practice. Just looking to see if there's anything else that I missed for well, and obviously if it's a flagrant collision at second base, then we have ejection. So I'm just going to read the first paragraph of what Jesse wrote. The intent of the forced play slide rule is to ensure the safety of all players. This is a safety rule as well as an interference rule. Whether the defense could have completed the double play has no bearing on the applicability of this rule. This is also important, and not everyone understands this. This rule pertains to a forced play situation at any base, regardless of the number of outs. I've called a forced play slide violation, bases loaded on a play at the plate. I've done it before. It is not just at second base. That's another one of those myths of the forced play slide rule. Any base, regardless of the number of outs. So the way that I call forced play slide rules in my thought process. I have a play. My first thought is, okay, do we have safe out? Then my next question is, or first question is it a forced play? Then it's safe out. Then it's legal slide. And then if the answer is yes, we're fine. If the answer is no, we're coming up calling time and we're going to kill the play right away. There is never delayed dead ball situation with the forced play slide rule. Any questions on the forced play slide rule so far? Hearing none. So to call it point at the offending runner. That's force play. Or that's an illegal slide. Time. That's an illegal slide. Out. Turn to the batter runner. Out. That's how I call it. That's a pretty safe way to call it. Do know that you're going to catch a lot of flack for calling this rule. And the reason that you're going to catch a lot of flack for calling this rule is because it's not frequently enforced enough. As I've said before, I've called 3 in one game before, and I had both coaches coming out going, well, this hasn't been called all year. Well, sorry, I'm glad I'm the first umpire to get it right. This is a rule. It's a player safety rule. And they have to slide. There's no way around this. So I'm going to pull up a video, and I'm going to mute this just for purposes. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, I would recommend you do that. This other channel here, JPEG 901C, I cannot emphasize, how good of a job that they do with these videos, and they're super informative. They're usually pretty short, and they keep them short and sweet, and they talk about different rule codes in them. So this isn't a college game, but we're going to talk through it like it's a high school game. So we had the slide there. I will back it up and we'll replay the slide. This camera angle is actually a pretty good camera angle. So we have the slide, and we got the umpire. So there's a delay in calling this. At the time that this had, there was a different rule at the college level, but we're just gonna we'll talk about this through a high school lens. So who has force play slide on this? Anybody got force play slide on this?
The second base umpire.
Right, but would you call force play slide in this situation?
It happened pretty fast, but it kind of looked like the second baseman was off the bag and he slid right at him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree. We'll watch this one more time. I totally think this is force play slide. Whether the player can make the play on it means nothing. We're gonna sneak to this one. This is the one where this angle is the angle where you will say, yes, this is 100% force play slide, because he did not slide into the bag. He slid into the fielder. It did alter the play, which, as we know, it can be part of the rule, but we don't need it to be. Anybody have a question as to why this is a force play slide rule violation? Through the college rule here.
Hey, Jake, I'll jump in here. I mean, this looks pretty textbook to me. I would say, looking at the other side of it, you mentioned you're going to catch flack for calling it. If I'm a coach that knows what I'm doing, if you don't call this, you're probably going to have to throw me out if I'm on the defensive side of the ball, because you're going to have a hard time explaining to me how this is not a force play slide rule. Yeah, did he make contact? No. Was it intentional? I always hear people say, well, that's a tough sell. Well, over my years of umpiring, I've caught more crap by sweeping under the rug and hoping no one sees it and not calling it than if I would have just called it and all move on with their lives. So Yeah, go get it. And if anyone wants to complain, like we said, it's a safety rule. I would even say, if you're not quite sure, err on the side of calling it. The more you call it, the more guys are going to slide right into the base. The less you call it, the more they're going to try and get away with stuff. Just like
this is where the go ahead.
Yep, just like a strike zone. If you establish you're going to have a big zone, it doesn't take long for everyone to figure it out. You might hear a couple moans and groans early, but eventually people are going to know this is how you're going to call the game, and they live with it.
Absolutely. And for the video, I just pulled up the graphic that you put together. The circle's about where the fielder or the runner ended up. Like, that's clearly in the protected area where the fielder should be protected. And I've said this before to many umpires, this rule does not get enforced enough. It should be enforced enough, because when you watch enough baseball, eventually you see kids take spikes to the shins and whatnot. And that's not fun to watch. So enforce it. If you enforce the rule, I will have your back. I can almost guarantee that if you enforce the rule, Mark will have your back. Jesse will have your back. Like, it's a very important rule that is not enforced enough. Call it. And yeah, I think this is one of those where we err on the side of calling it as opposed to not calling it. So any questions on the forced play slide rule? Hearing none, I will stop the recording. Thanks for attending today, guys.